The morning of my wedding, my father sat me down at the kitchen table of the house I grew up in and told me he loved me. He said it looking straight into my eyes, with his hand over mine, the way fathers do in movies. He said it like he meant it. 3 hours later, while I was in the bridal suite having my hair pinned into place, he called his attorney and had my name removed from his will. He didn't tell me. He didn't warn me. He just did it, quietly, like erasing a line from a document that had become inconvenient. I found out 6 weeks later, not from him. From Grandma Ruth. If this story is already making your chest tighten, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. But to understand why that phone call from my grandmother changed everything, and I mean everything, you need to understand what kind of family I was born into, and what kind of daughter I had spent 29 years trying to be. My name is Clara Beaumont. I grew up in Ashford, Connecticut, in a house with a wraparound porch and a kitchen that always smelled like something my mother wasn't cooking herself. We had a housekeeper named Gloria who came on Tuesdays and Fridays. We had a lawn service and a car service and a country club membership. My father, Richard Beaumont, was a corporate attorney. Senior partner at Beaumont and Hale, a firm he'd built with his college roommate starting from a 2-room office in 1991. By the time I was born in 1993, the firm had 12 attorneys, a downtown Hartford address, and a reputation. By the time I was 10, it had 32 attorneys and a reputation that preceded it into rooms. My father was not a warm man. He was not a cold one, either. He was precise. He spoke the way people speak when they've spent 3 decades choosing words for legal documents, carefully, with weight, with the specific intention that they could not be misinterpreted later. He believed in achievement. He believed in image. He believed that the Beaumont name was something you carried, not something you simply inherited. My older brother, Daniel, was the son who carried it effortlessly. Daniel was everything my father had ever wanted in a legacy: sharp, charming, built for a boardroom. He went to Dartmouth on a partial academic scholarship, graduated top of his class, joined the firm at 26 as a junior associate, made full partner at 32. My father kept a framed photo of Daniel's partnership announcement on his desk. I know because I was in that office hundreds of times. The photo was always there. There was no photo of me. I was the daughter who made different choices. Not reckless choices. Not foolish ones. Just different. I studied architecture at the Rhode Island School of Design. I graduated in 2015 with a portfolio that won a Regional Student Design Award and a job offer from Linden & Marsh, a firm in Boston with a genuine reputation for sustainable residential design. I loved the work. I was good at it. By 26 I was leading projects. By 28 I had been promoted to senior associate, which in architecture means you are the person the clients actually trust, even if your name isn't on the door yet. But architecture was not law. Boston was not Hartford. And my career, in my father's specific vocabulary, was a hobby that happened to pay. I heard him say it once. Not to me, to his college friend Gerald at a 4th of July party when I was 27. They were standing by the grill, drinks in hand, talking about their children the way men of a certain generation talk about their investments. Gerald's daughter was in medical school. Gerald's son was doing something in finance. My father said, "Clara does architecture up in Boston. It's a passion project, really. She's creative. Always has been." He said it with a kind of fond dismissal, the tone you use when describing someone's charming eccentricity. Like I was a child who'd decided to become a professional painter. I had billed $1.2 million in client projects that year. I said nothing. Went back inside. Helped my mother arrange the dessert table. That was the pattern. That was always the pattern. The money situation crystallized it more than anything else. When Daniel turned 30, my father gave him a check for $150,000. I know the amount because my mother told me, not as a confession, but as a point of pride. Your father wanted Daniel to have something solid to invest in the firm's growth. I was 27 at the time. I didn't say anything about the number. I smiled and said that was wonderful. 8 months later, when I was trying to save for the deposit on my first real apartment in Boston, not a shared walk-up, but an actual adult apartment where I could have a home office and stop folding my drafting table into a closet, my father lent me $8,000. He used the word lent. He sent a written repayment schedule. I paid it back in full within 14 months, $572 a month, on top of my regular bills, on top of my student loan payment of $620 a month. I have the bank records. I met Thomas in the spring of 2020. He was a structural engineer, which my father appreciated more than he ever admitted, working for a mid-sized firm in Cambridge. We met at a project review where his firm had been brought in as a consultant on one of my residential builds. He was precise, thoughtful, funny in a dry, quiet way that took me 3 weeks to fully understand. We were together for 2 years before he proposed, and when he did, it was at the kitchen table of my apartment with no ring yet because he said he'd wanted to ask me first before choosing something I'd have to wear forever. That's the kind of man he was. We got engaged in April 2022. The wedding was set for September 17, 2023. 16 months of planning. My mother was involved, genuinely, warmly involved, in the way mothers sometimes are when they finally have a daughter's wedding to organize. She called twice a week. She had opinions about florals and strong feelings about the seating chart. It was the closest my mother and I had been in years, and I let myself enjoy it without examining it too carefully. My father was less involved. He attended the venue tour, looked at the contract, said it seemed reasonable. He wrote a check for $40,000 toward the wedding costs, which I was grateful for, which I said out loud more than once. Thomas's parents contributed $15,000. We covered the remaining $22,000 ourselves. Total wedding cost, $77,000. A number I know precisely because I built the budget in a spreadsheet and tracked every invoice. The will was something I had known about in the vague, theoretical way that children of comfortable families sometimes know about these things. My grandparents, my father's parents, had been quietly wealthy in the way old Connecticut families sometimes are. Not flashy, but substantial. My grandfather Henry had died in 2009, leaving everything to my grandmother Ruth. My grandmother Ruth was 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only member of my extended family who had ever treated me and Daniel with exactly equal regard. She used to say it plainly, Richard has his favorites. I don't. She'd squeeze my hand when she said it. I thought she was just being grandmother generous. I didn't know how literal she was being. My father's will, as I understood it, divided his estate between Daniel and me. He had mentioned it once when I was 22, in the context of encouraging me to take my career seriously. This firm will belong to Daniel one day. Your inheritance will be your foundation. I had nodded. I had gone back to school. I had taken my career seriously. I had done everything right. On the morning of September 17, 2023, I was sitting in the bridal suite of the Ashford Manor Inn at 9:47 a.m. My hair was being pinned. My mother was arranging the veil on the dresser. My maid of honor, Sophie, was pouring mimosas. My phone was face down on the vanity because I had decided not to look at it until after the ceremony. It was the best decision I could have made, and I will tell you why. At 9:51 a.m., my father was in his study at the family home 4 miles away. His attorney, a man named Gerald Pratt, not his firm, a separate personal attorney he used for estate matters, had driven out at my father's specific request. At 9:51 a.m., my father signed an amendment to his will. The amendment removed my name from the primary beneficiary designation and redirected my share of the estate to Daniel in full. Gerald Pratt witnessed it and notarized it. The whole thing took 11 minutes. At 10:15 a.m., my father arrived at the Ashford Manor Inn, walked into the bridal suite, and told me I looked beautiful. He held my face in his hands. He said, "I'm proud of you, Clara." He walked me down the aisle at 2 p.m. He gave a toast at the reception that made my mother cry. He danced with me to What a Wonderful World, and he held on a little longer than I expected at the end of the song. I thought it was sentiment. I thought something had shifted. I thought, the way daughters sometimes foolishly think, that maybe he finally saw me. I was wrong about what the longer hold meant. He was saying goodbye to something. I just didn't know what yet. The weeks after the wedding were the weeks of thank you notes and gift organization and the settling back into real life that follows the beautiful chaos of a wedding. Thomas and I had a short honeymoon, 5 days in Vermont, not the European trip we'd talked about, because we were both carrying the financial weight of the wedding and wanted to be responsible. We were happy. Genuinely happy in a way I hadn't expected to be, given how much the preceding 16 months had cost in both money and emotional labor. It was in late October 2023 that my grandmother called. She called on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my drafting table reviewing plans for a residential project in Brookline. Ruth Beaumont was not a woman who called without reason. She was also not a woman who opened a conversation with anything other than the exact thing she meant to say. Clara. Pause. I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen to all of it before you say a word. I put down my pencil. Okay, Grandma. Your father amended his will on the morning of your wedding. The room went very still. Outside my window, a delivery truck double parked on the street. Someone honked. The world kept moving and I sat completely motionless. He removed your name. Everything goes to Daniel now. My mouth opened and nothing came out. I found out because Gerald Pratt is a fool who had a drink too many at the Hartford Bar Association dinner last month and said something he shouldn't have to the wrong person, who told your Uncle Philip, who told me. Silence. Clara. I'm here. There's something else. Something I need you to understand. She paused, and in that pause I heard something I had never heard in my grandmother's voice before. Resolve. I changed mine 2 years ago. You've been the primary beneficiary of my estate since November 2021. I did it quietly. I didn't tell your father. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell your mother. I told my attorney, and I told no one else. I couldn't speak. You've always known what you were worth, Clara. Even when this family tried to convince you otherwise. My estate goes to you. All of it. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understood. But I didn't understand the full weight of it until 2 days later, when I called her attorney, a woman named Patricia Webb in Greenwich, who confirmed everything my grandmother had said and walked me through the numbers. My grandmother's estate. The house in Greenwich on 4 acres. A portfolio of investments that Henry Beaumont had spent 40 years carefully building. A trust that had sat quietly generating returns since 1987. Total current value, $4. 2 million. I sat in my car in the parking garage beneath my office building for 34 minutes after that phone call. I did not cry. I thought about my father's hands on my face that morning. I thought about the toast he'd given. I thought about What a Wonderful World and the way he'd held on at the end. I thought about Gerald Pratt at 9:51 a.m. with his notary stamp while I sat 4 miles away having my hair pinned. Thomas was home when I got there. He knew something was wrong before I said a word. He sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table, a different city, a different life, and he listened to everything. All of it. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I don't know yet." He said, "Take your time. But whatever you decide, I'm right here." He didn't tell me what to feel. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said he was there. I thought about the fact that my father had paid for a wedding planner, a venue, and flowers for a daughter whose name he'd removed from his future at 9:51 that morning. I thought about 11 minutes and a notary stamp. I thought about 32 years of being the other one, the creative one, the passion project daughter. Something in me went very, very quiet. Not the quiet of someone who had given up. The quiet of someone who had finally, completely, decided. I did not call my father. I did not call my mother. I did not call Daniel. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out everything I had kept over the years, the loan repayment records, the bank statements, the promotion letters, the award documentation, the project billings. I made a folder on my laptop. I labeled it simply, The Truth. Thomas watched me from the doorway. You're preparing something. Not yet. I looked at the folder. But I'm going to be ready when the time comes. He nodded. He understood the way he always understood, quietly, completely. The firm Christmas party, he said. Your father hosts every year. The whole family goes. It's December 15th. I looked at the date on my calendar. 7 weeks away. That's where it happens, I said. In front of everyone who matters to him most. Thomas crossed the room, sat beside me. Then we have 7 weeks. He opened his own laptop. I have never loved him more than I did in that moment. The weeks between the phone call and December 15th were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I reviewed plans. I attended client meetings. I answered my mother's texts about Christmas plans with warmth I had to manufacture from scratch. I spoke to my father twice on the phone, once when he called to check in, once when he called about Thanksgiving logistics, and both times I was perfectly normal. Warm, even. Interested in his stories about the firm, about Daniel's latest client, about the Hartford social circuit. I asked questions. I listened. I gave him nothing. He had no idea. That was the point. Grandma Ruth and I spoke every Thursday. She was methodical in the way of someone who had watched powerful men underestimate the women around them for 8 decades and had decided, late in the game, to do something about it. She told me about her estate plan, walked me through the structure. She had moved quietly. Everything was in order. Everything was documented. Your grandfather always said the best legal strategy is the one the other side doesn't see coming, she told me one Thursday evening. Gerald Pratt spent 40 years underestimating me right alongside Henry. That was his greatest professional failure. There was something that might have been satisfaction in her voice. You are so like me, Clara. You always have been. By the first week of December, I had everything. Bank records going back 12 years. My loan repayment documentation, down to the final $572 payment. My performance reviews from Linden and Marsh. My project portfolio with client billing records. A timeline of every significant financial moment in my family's history that I had either witnessed, participated in, or been on the losing end of. Patricia Webb had prepared a summary document of my grandmother's estate plan, not the full legal document, but a clear, dated summary on firm letterhead confirming the primary beneficiary designation, effective November 2021. I had it printed and placed in a manila folder at the back of my home filing cabinet. I did not carry it with me. I did not need to yet. December 15th was a Saturday. The Beaumont and Hale Christmas party was held every year in the firm's main conference room, which had been converted for the occasion, catering tables, a bar, a small stage where my father traditionally gave a speech and Daniel traditionally stood at his right hand. Extended family was always invited. My mother's sister Rachel. My father's brother Philip and his wife. Several of the senior partners and their families. 22 people in total, people whose opinion my father had spent 3 decades carefully cultivating. Thomas and I drove down from Boston on the morning of December 15th. I wore a dark green dress, structured, professional, the kind of thing I wore to important client presentations. Thomas wore a dark suit. We didn't talk much in the car. We didn't need to. The folder was in my bag. My grandmother had confirmed 2 days earlier that she would be there. She'd said it simply, I wouldn't miss it. When I asked if she was certain, she said, Clara, I've been waiting 2 years for the right moment. It appears the moment has arrived. We pulled into the firm's parking garage at 6:12 p.m. Thomas turned off the engine. He looked at me. Ready? I checked my bag. The folder was there. Patricia Webb's summary letter was on top. Yes. He squeezed my hand once, firmly. We got out of the car. I want you to stay with me, because what happened in that conference room over the next 2 hours changed every single thing. But I need you to understand what it cost to get there first, the silence I kept for 7 weeks, the warmth I manufactured on those phone calls, the way I smiled at Thanksgiving dinner while my father carved the turkey and talked about Daniel's new client. I need you to understand what it takes to wait, to be patient, to let the right moment come to you instead of chasing it before you're ready. Because that patience, that specific, quiet, devastating patience, is the only reason what happened next hit the way it did. Drop a comment telling me what you think is about to happen. I want to see your predictions. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because the confrontation is coming, and you do not want to miss it. The Beaumont and Hale Christmas party had its own rhythm, the same every year for as long as I could remember. Cocktail hour from 6 to 7, catered by the same Hartford restaurant my father had used since 2004. Dinner from 7 to 8:30, seated, assigned, my father at the head of the long conference table that had been pushed to one side and dressed with white linen and candles. Speeches from 8:30 to 9. My father's first, the firm overview, the year in numbers, the gratitude. Then Daniel's, a toast to the partners, to the clients, to the family that made it all possible. Then the room opened up and people drank and laughed, and my father held court in the way that men who have built something real are allowed to hold court, with warmth and authority and the quiet confidence of someone who has never had reason to doubt the story he tells about himself. I had been to this party 11 times as an adult. 11 times I had stood in that room and watched my father look at Daniel the way architects look at their best buildings, with ownership and pride and the particular satisfaction of something made exactly right. 11 times I had eaten the catered salmon and drunk the decent wine and smiled at the partners' wives who always asked the same questions. What was I working on? Was Boston treating me well? Wasn't it wonderful, what Richard had built? Yes, I would say. Yes. Wonderful. This was the 12th time. And I was done saying yes. We arrived at the conference room at 6:21 p.m. The space was exactly as I remembered it, the mahogany table repositioned, the winter floral arrangements on each surface, the bar set up along the far wall where the associates' workstations usually lived. My mother spotted us first and crossed the room with genuine warmth, hugging me, shaking Thomas's hand, complimenting my dress. She looked happy. She always looked happy at this party. It was one of the few times each year when the version of her life she had chosen felt fully validated in every direction. I kissed her cheek. I told her she looked beautiful, which was true. Daniel was near the bar with his wife, Melissa, and 2 of the senior partners. He saw me, raised his glass, gave me the easy, uncomplicated grin of a man who has never once wondered whether he was loved. Clara. You made it. We always make it. I smiled back. Thomas shook his hand. Firm handshake, professional pleasantries, the specific courtesy of 2 men who respect each other enough to keep it brief. Melissa hugged me. She was kind, Melissa. She had always been kind to me. I did not hold against her what she didn't know. My father was across the room with Gerald Pratt and 2 of the firm's longest tenured clients. I watched him from a distance for a moment before he saw me. He was in his element, relaxed, expansive, every sentence landing with the weight of a man who had never in his professional life been in a room where he wasn't the most significant person present. He was wearing the watch Daniel had given him for his 60th birthday. He looked good. He looked like everything he had always wanted to look like. He saw me. His face opened into a genuine smile and he excused himself from the conversation and crossed the room. He hugged me properly, the kind of hug that would have undone me 6 weeks ago. Clara. You look wonderful. Thank you, Dad. He shook Thomas's hand. Good drive down? Easy. Light traffic. Good, good. He put his hand on my shoulder briefly. glad you're here. The hand dropped. He moved back toward Gerald Pratt. He was glad I was here the way a person is glad the weather cooperated, as a pleasant background condition that required nothing further. I got a glass of water from the bar and found a position near the south window where I could see the full room. Thomas stayed near me, quiet, present. He had learned over 3 years how to read my stillness, when it meant I was processing and when it meant I was preparing. He knew which one this was. "She's here," he said softly, tilting his head toward the entrance. I looked. Grandma Ruth had arrived, escorted by my Uncle Philip. She was wearing a deep navy dress, pearls, and the expression she wore when she had made a decision and was entirely at peace with it. She was 81 years old and she moved through the room like she owned it, which, in the way that mattered, she did. She found my eyes across the room immediately. The look she gave me was brief, clear, and complete. She was ready. Philip settled her in a chair near the end of the table with a glass of sparkling water and went to find his wife. Grandma Ruth sat with her back straight and her hands folded, and she did not look at my father. I noticed that she did not look at my father even once during the entire cocktail hour. She spoke to my mother, to Melissa, to 2 of the partners' wives she'd known for decades. She asked Thomas careful, intelligent questions about his work. She was warm and present and entirely composed. She was also, I understood, doing exactly what I had done for the past 7 weeks. Waiting. Dinner was seated by 7:15. I was placed, as I had always been placed at this dinner, in the middle of the table's long side, visible but not prominent, accessible but not central. Daniel was at my father's right hand. Melissa beside him. My mother at my father's left. Grandma Ruth had been placed 3 seats down from my mother, which put her directly across the table from Gerald Pratt. I watched her notice this and smile slightly to herself. She caught my eye and raised one eyebrow, barely perceptible. I looked down at my plate. Thomas pressed his knee against mine under the table. The dinner itself was what it always was. The salmon, the roasted vegetables, the conversations that moved around the table in the comfortable, circular way of people who have known each other for years. My father told a story about a case that had settled well in November. One of the partners talked about his daughter's acceptance to Yale Law. Philip asked about my work and I talked about the Brookline project with enough enthusiasm to be credible and enough brevity to avoid drawing attention. My father half listened. Daniel didn't listen at all. He was talking to the partner on his other side about something that required both hands to illustrate. My mother leaned toward me at one point during the main course and said quietly, "Your father's going to say something nice about you in the toast this year." I asked him to. I looked at her. She was sincere. She had genuinely asked him. She had no idea that 3 hours before my wedding, while she was arranging my veil and crying at how beautiful I looked, her husband had been 11 minutes away from the document that erased me. I put my hand over hers briefly. "That's kind of you, Mom." She squeezed back, pleased with herself. 8:30. My father stood. The room settled. He was a practiced speaker, not theatrical, never theatrical, but precise and warm in exactly the right proportions. He talked about the firm's year. Revenue up 14%. 2 new major client relationships. An expansion to the New Haven office scheduled for spring. He talked about the partners by name, giving each a line or 2 that landed as specific and genuine. He talked about the families in the room, the spouses and children and parents who made the work possible. He mentioned Daniel by name 3 times. He mentioned Melissa once. He looked at my mother and said something warm that made her laugh. He mentioned my name once, near the end, in a list, and my daughter Clara and her husband Thomas, who made the drive down from Boston. A list. My name in a list. Thomas's hand found mine under the table. Then my father paused. He picked up his glass. He looked around the room with the expression of a man about to say something he'd prepared, something that was meant to land as spontaneous. "I want to say one more thing before I hand this off to Daniel." He looked toward Daniel, then around the table. This firm has always been about legacy. About building something that outlasts any single person's career. I have spent 32 years building a legacy. And I know with certainty, his eyes landed on Daniel, held there, that it is in the right hands going forward. Daniel raised his glass. The partners smiled. My mother beamed. Grandma Ruth did not move. I did not move. Thomas leaned 1 inch toward me. His voice was below a whisper. Now? I shook my head. Not yet. I wanted my father to finish. I wanted Daniel's toast to go. I wanted the room to be fully settled into the story they believed they were in. Because the only way the truth lands the way it needs to land is if the lie is completely comfortable first. Daniel's toast was gracious and articulate and landed exactly as intended. He thanked the partners, the clients, the firm's staff. He thanked my father with genuine-sounding emotion. He raised his glass and said, to the Beaumont name, and to what it stands for. The room drank. My father looked like a man who had accomplished everything he set out to accomplish in this lifetime. He looked settled. Complete. I stood up. It was not dramatic. I did not push back my chair. I simply rose, which drew attention the way unexpected things draw attention in quiet rooms, a small shift that makes the air change. My father noticed first. Slight confusion. Clara? I'm sorry to interrupt. My voice was even. Conversational. I just need to say something before the evening moves on. My father's expression went careful. This isn't really I'll be brief. I looked around the table. 22 people. Gerald Pratt directly across from me, who had driven to my family home on the morning of my wedding with his notary stamp. Partners. Family. Witnesses. Every single person whose opinion my father had spent 32 years cultivating, all in one room. I want to add something to the conversation about legacy. I reached into my bag. Slowly. No urgency. The manila folder came out and I set it on the table in front of me without opening it. Because I think the full picture is important. My father's jaw tightened. Clara, this is not the appropriate, Dad. One word. Quiet. Complete. He stopped. I had never in my life said his name in a way that made him stop. I saw the moment he understood that something had changed, that the daughter who had always absorbed the dismissals and swallowed the comparisons and smiled through the lists was not the woman currently standing at this table. He stopped. I continued. On the morning of my wedding, September 17th, at approximately 9:51 a.m., you amended your will. You removed my name as a beneficiary. You redirected my share of your estate to Daniel in full. The silence was immediate and total. Absolute. The kind of silence that has weight. I watched Gerald Pratt's face drain of color. The entire amendment took 11 minutes. Gerald can confirm the timeline. Gerald did not move. Did not speak. My mother's hand went to her mouth. You then drove to the venue. You held my face and told me you were proud of me. You walked me down the aisle. You gave a toast. You danced with me to What a Wonderful World. I picked up the manila folder. What I'd like to share with everyone here tonight is a different part of the legacy conversation. I opened the folder. The first page was Patricia Webb's summary letter, dated November 19, 2021, on firm letterhead with the Green Street address. I held it up clearly so the room could see it. 2 years ago, Ruth Beaumont changed her estate plan. She designated me as the primary beneficiary of her estate, effective November 2021. I set the letter on the table and slid it toward the center. Total current estate value, $4. 2 million. Grandma Ruth sat perfectly still. Hands folded. Expression unchanged. Daniel's glass was no longer raised. It was sitting on the table and he was looking at my grandmother with an expression that was trying to form itself into something coherent and failing. My father's face had gone the specific gray of a man whose carefully managed world has just rearranged itself without his permission. My mother was crying silently, and I was not sure she fully understood yet what she was crying about. I looked at my father. This was the moment. This was what 7 weeks of patience had built toward. You spent 32 years building a legacy. You chose Daniel to carry it. That's your right. I held his gaze. But Grandma Ruth spent 81 years watching this family. And she made a different choice. Pause. One breath. She chose the one you kept removing from the picture. My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I had never seen that before. My father, the courtroom-trained attorney, the man who could speak with precision in any situation, without words. Gerald Pratt had developed a sudden intense interest in his dinner plate. One of the partners, a man named Howard Klein who had known my father for 20 years, was looking at him with an expression that was doing its best to be neutral and wasn't fully succeeding. I did not come here tonight to embarrass you. My voice stayed level. I came here because you gave a speech about legacy, and I think everyone in this room deserves to understand what legacy actually means in this family. I closed the folder. The woman who built this family's real foundation, I looked at Grandma Ruth, already knew. Grandma Ruth looked at my father for the first time all evening. She said nothing. She didn't need to. My father looked at his mother and saw, in her expression, that this had not been a surprise to her. That she had known. That she had been here tonight not as a family elder at a Christmas party but as a witness to something she had helped construct. He looked like a man reading a verdict he should have seen coming. I sat down. Thomas's hand covered mine on top of the table this time, visible. I had said 10 sentences. I had not raised my voice. I had not cried. I had not accused or condemned or catalogued every injustice in sequence. I had simply put the truth on the table, in the room, in front of the people who mattered, and let it breathe. The evening did not recover. People tried. My mother attempted to redirect the conversation twice and both times it settled back into silence like water finding its level. Daniel said something to my father in a low voice and my father shook his head once, sharp. Gerald Pratt left at 9:15, 20 minutes before he normally would have. Howard Klein found me near the bar at 9:30 and said, "Clara, I always thought highly of your work. I want you to know that." He said it quietly, with the weight of a man who had just revised several years of assumptions simultaneously. I thanked him. He nodded and moved away. My father did not speak to me again that evening. He stood in his usual corner with his usual drink and he received the goodnights of his partners with his usual warmth, but something in his bearing had changed. The completeness was gone. He looked like a man who had given a speech about a building and then turned around to find the foundation had already been deeded to someone else. My mother hugged me at the coat check at 9:45. She held on for a long time without speaking. When she pulled back her eyes were still wet. She looked like she wanted to say something and could not locate the right words in any language. I kissed her cheek. "I love you, Mom." She nodded. "I know." That was all. Grandma Ruth found us at the elevator. She took my hands in both of hers, the way she had always done since I was small. Her hands were cool and steady and completely certain. "Your grandfather would have done the same thing your father did," she said matter-of-factly. "He was that kind of man. I loved him, but I knew what he was." She squeezed my hands. "I decided a long time ago that the next generation would be different. That someone in this family would see clearly." She looked at me without sentimentality. "You always saw clearly, Clara. Even when they told you there was nothing to see." She kissed my cheek. Philip appeared behind her with her coat. She released my hands. She was done. Everything she had needed to do, she had done. She walked to the elevator with her back straight and her pearls catching the hallway light and she did not look back. Thomas and I drove the first 20 minutes out of Hartford in silence. The city lights gave way to the dark of the highway and I watched the white lines come and go and thought about a man standing at a study window with a pen in his hand at 9:51 a.m. on a September morning. "How do you feel?" Thomas asked finally. I thought about it honestly. Like I've been holding something very heavy for a very long time and I just put it down. He drove. "Are you okay?" "I don't know yet." "True. That's okay." "Also true." My phone was in my bag. I did not take it out. Not yet. We stopped for coffee at a rest area somewhere around Springfield. Paper cups, gas station lighting, the particular stillness of a highway stop at 10:30 on a December night. Thomas wrapped both hands around his cup. "What happens now?" I thought about the $4. $2 million. I thought about Patricia Webb's letter on my father's conference table, still sitting there when we left, because I had not taken it back. I thought about Howard Klein's face. I thought about Gerald Pratt's sudden interest in his dinner plate. "Now," I said, "the story changes." "Which part?" "The part where I'm the one who gets erased." The calls came the next morning. My mother first, at 7:52 a.m. Then Daniel at 8:17. Then my mother again at 9:04. I answered none of them. Thomas made breakfast. We sat at our kitchen table in Cambridge and ate eggs and drank coffee and the December light came through the windows and the apartment was quiet and entirely ours. At 10:30, I texted Patricia Webb. She responded within minutes. She had anticipated this. She'd prepared a follow-up meeting for the following Thursday in Greenwich. She confirmed in writing, as she had confirmed before, that the estate designation was ironclad, properly executed, and entirely outside my father's ability to contest. It had been in place for 2 years. It was not a reaction to the previous evening. It was not emotional. It was a legal document completed in 2021 by a woman who had simply, finally, decided to see clearly. At 11:15, an email arrived from Howard Klein. Subject line, checking in. He had a client, a residential developer, significant portfolio, Boston-based, who had been looking for an architectural firm with sustainable residential design expertise. He had mentioned my name and my firm. Would I be open to an introduction? I sat with that email for a long time. Then I wrote back. Yes. I would. My father called on December 20th. I let it go to voicemail. He did not leave one. He called again on December 22nd. This time I answered. There was a long pause before he spoke, which was unusual. My father did not pause. "I think we need to talk." "I agree." Silence. "What you did at the party was accurate." Another pause. "Clara." He said my name the way he had said it my whole life, like a statement that expected me to fill in the rest. I did not fill in the rest. "Your grandmother made her decision independently," he said finally. "I'm aware." "I didn't know she had, you didn't ask." "You didn't think to ask. You thought you understood how this family was arranged, and you made your decisions accordingly." I kept my voice even. "You were wrong about one person." The silence stretched. "I want you to know, Dad." Another first. Another stop. "Don't tell me what you want me to know. Tell me what you're prepared to do differently." He did not have an answer to that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was the first time in 30 years that the conversation had been mine to shape. I told him I would be in touch after the new year. I wished him a Merry Christmas. I meant it more than I expected to. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a long moment in the December quiet. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. We are almost at the end, and I promise you, the final chapter is worth everything that came before it. January came quietly. The new year has a way of doing that. After a December that changes everything, it arrives without ceremony, without fanfare, just a different number on the calendar and the particular stillness of a life that is finally moving in the right direction. The Howard Klein introduction happened on January 9th. His client was a developer named Marcus Webb, no relation to Patricia, who had spent the last 4 years trying to find an architectural firm that understood sustainable residential design well enough to lead a 32-unit mixed-use development in the South End. He'd interviewed 6 firms. He hadn't found the right fit. Howard had sent him my portfolio on December 22, 2 days after my father's phone call, with a note that I was told later was 3 sentences long: "She's the best residential designer in Boston. She understands how buildings should feel to live in, not just look at. Call her first." Marcus called me first. We met on January 9 at a coffee shop on Tremont Street. We talked for 2.5 hours. On January 19, Linden and Marsh was awarded the South End project. Total contract value, $1. $4 million. My name was on the proposal as lead designer. My director, a careful, measured man named Patrick Linden who did not give credit lightly, sent me an email that afternoon with one line: "This one's yours, Clara." I read it 3 times. The professional shift was real and it moved quickly. Marcus introduced me to 2 other developers in his network. By March I had led the firm to 2 additional project proposals, one of which converted to a signed contract in April. Patrick called me into his office in late March and told me that the partnership conversation, the one I had been quietly working toward for 4 years, was now a formal discussion. My name would go on the door. Not as a courtesy. As a fact. Beaumont and Linden was how Patrick put it, which made me laugh, not because of the coincidence, but because of what it meant. My name on a building, finally, in the only context that had ever actually mattered to me. Grandma Ruth died on February 28. She had known it was coming. She had known since November, a quiet diagnosis, a quieter decision, and the specific piece of a woman who has arranged everything she needed to arrange. She died at home in Greenwich, in her own bed, with Philip beside her and the February light coming through the windows she'd looked out of for 50 years. She was 81 years old and she died entirely on her own terms, which is the only way Ruth Beaumont would have accepted leaving. I was with her the weekend before. We sat in her living room with tea and she told me about my grandfather, about the early years of the firm, about the choices she had made and the ones she had deferred to, and the long, slow process of understanding which regrets were worth carrying and which ones you simply had to set down. She talked about me as a child, the specific things she had noticed that no one else had named. The way I solved problems by drawing them first. The way I always knew where the light was best in any room. "You were always going to build something real," she said. "I just wanted to make sure you had the ground to build on." I held her hand. I didn't trust my voice enough to speak. She patted my hand once, twice. "You're ready, Clara. You've been ready for years. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not even yourself." The estate settlement took 4 months. Patricia Webb was methodical and patient and entirely unintimidated by the fact that my father hired his own attorney to review the documents. There was nothing to contest. 2 years of clean, properly executed, entirely unambiguous legal work. My father's attorney reviewed the full file and advised him, professionally and correctly, to accept it. He did. He had no other option. The Greenwich house was appraised at $1. $1 million. The investment portfolio was valued at $2. $8 million. The trust distributed a further $310,000. Total, $4. $21 million. Transferred to me in full by June 30th. I did not tell anyone at the firm the number. I did not post it anywhere. I did not call my father to confirm he had received the final settlement notification from Patricia Webb's office. I assumed he had. I assumed that receiving that document, confirmation that every dollar of his mother's estate had gone to the daughter he'd erased from his own will on her wedding morning, was a particular kind of consequence that required nothing additional from me. Thomas and I bought our house in July. A 1920s craftsman in Brookline, 4 blocks from the project that had first gotten me the South End introduction. Original hardwood floors, 2 working fireplaces, a sun porch that faces east and fills with morning light in a way that made me stand in the empty room for a long time the first time I saw it. We paid cash. I want you to understand what I mean when I say that. We paid cash for our home, in full, without a mortgage, without a loan, without a repayment schedule, without anyone's permission. Thomas carried 1 box through the front door of our house and set it down and looked at me and said, "We're home." I stood in the entry hall and I breathed. Really breathed. The kind of breath you take when you have been holding something heavy for so long that you have forgotten what your chest feels like without it. My father and I speak occasionally now. Carefully, with the particular formality of 2 people who have agreed to be honest with each other without yet knowing how far that honesty can go. He came to the housewarming in August. He stood in the sun porch and looked at the morning light and did not say much. Before he left, in the driveway, he said, "Your grandmother was right about you." It was the most direct thing he had ever said to me about my worth. I thanked him. I meant it. I am not able to forgive him completely and I am not going to pretend otherwise, but I am able to be in a room with him and mean it when I say I hope he is well, and sometimes that is what healing looks like, not the full restoration of something, but the honest acknowledgement of what remains. Daniel and I are in a harder place. He knew, after December 15th, that the amendment existed. He knew my name had been removed. He has not apologized. I have not asked him to. We are in the long, uncertain territory of a relationship that has had the truth told into it and does not yet know what it is going to become. I have time. So does he. Patrick Linden made the partnership official in September. The firm name changed on October 1st. I stood outside the building the morning the new sign went up, Linden and Beaumont, in clean steel letters on the facade. And I called Thomas and he answered on the first ring and I said nothing for a moment because I was looking at my name on a building and I needed a second to let it be real. He waited. He is always very good at waiting. "It's up," I said. "I know," he said. "I'm around the corner." He was. He was standing on the sidewalk with 2 cups of coffee from the place we'd been going to since our first month in Boston, paper cups, nothing fancy. And he handed me one and we stood together and looked at my name on the building and did not say anything else because there was nothing else that needed to be said. What I know now, that I did not know at 22 or 25 or 29, is this. Being seen clearly by even one person is enough to survive being erased by many. My grandmother saw me for 81 years, quietly, without announcement, and when the moment came, she turned that clarity into something permanent. She gave me ground to stand on. What I built on that ground was mine. The money made it possible. The work made it real. I want to be precise about that, because the money is not the story. The money is what happens when someone finally decides that what you've always been worth should be reflected in something the world can verify. I am 30 years old. My name is on a building. I live in a house with morning light and a man who has never once asked me to make myself smaller. I know what my grandmother knew. I know what she built toward. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure it was worth the waiting. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.